want to welcome everybody. I'm Dr. Brian Walsh. I'm the chiropractic physician here, and we do a lot of wellness therapy here too. Not just chiropractic, we do like the whole person. We like to treat the whole person. So we're going to be talking specifically about what I call adrenal fatigue, or things that affect adrenal health, and some of the connections that happen there too. But I always like to start off with this quote that kind of embodies how we approach things. It says, "The doctor of the future will give no medicine, but will interest his patients in the care of the human frame, in diet, and in the cause and prevention of disease." Right? That's a very holistic way of looking at things, and that was Thomas Edison that said that. So he had a very, like I said, holistic way of looking at the human frame and the spine. You know, it protects the organs and it does all your nerve activity and organ function. In diet, and nowadays diet has really become a major factor in why people aren't well these days. And so the other aspect of that is the cause and prevention. So medicine is really good at identifying a problem and using medicine or surgery to treat those kind of things, right? But we really want to try to focus on more the cause part and the prevention, because then you don't have to fix things as much, right? If you get that front end instead of waiting till it's broken. So that's how we kind of like to look at things. When I was an engineer, because I was an engineer for 10 years, we always had to figure out what the cause of the problem was, whether it was a circuit board, a computer system, whatever it was. And once we figured out whatever that cause or the thing that was keeping things from working, and we fixed that, the system worked the way it was designed to. And our bodies are really the same way. Once you find out the cause and you correct it, and a lot of it is diet and lifestyle and our day-to-day stuff, then the body will heal the way God designed it. And that's really kind of how it works. So we'll start with a little anatomy. So the adrenal glands are little, two small, little kind of walnut shape, sit on top of your kidneys. And even though they're small, they regulate a lot of different things in the body. So things like your blood pressure will be affected. Blood sugar is affected by the adrenal glands. These are the things that produce your cortisol, your adrenaline. They even have an impact on the sex hormones. So one of the things that, especially for women, as they transition into more menopause years, if their adrenal gland function is not well, the adrenals are supposed to be like a little bit of a backup system for that hormonal transition. And when they're weak or in that exhaustion phase, menopause tends to be a lot harder for a woman. So sometimes you can fix their adrenals and their menopause symptoms get better without giving them hormones, which is the ideal approach. And they're basically, the adrenals are your fight or flight, right? So if you're running from a lion, they're kicking in and producing the adrenaline and all these things. When those get out of balance, you also can have sleep problems and many different issues that start impacting other areas of your life. Sometimes with I mentioned blood pressure, it can be high blood pressure sometimes, but when people have been exhausted for a long period, especially like 6 months to a year or more, they can have low blood pressure problems. So sometimes when you fix their blood pressure problems, they're not as dizzy and they function better and they don't wear out as easy. So that's kind of that part. Some of the signs that something's not right, with that I mentioned sleep can be disturbed. A lot of times what will happen, sometimes it's a hard time getting to sleep, but a lot of times you'll get to sleep and then wake up. And you may get back to sleep or you may not get back to sleep depending on how exhausted you are. Can cause things like with your hands being cold or moist sometimes. I mentioned the menopausal type things. Sometimes it'll contribute to the hot flashes problem that women can have. If you have some like racy heart or pounding heart, now it could also be a thyroid problem. That's something else to rule out. But when the adrenals get really tired, your heart rate doesn't always regulate well. And so you can get fluctuations in the heart rate a little bit. And something to mention is that in the medical world, when they look at the adrenal glands, they look at them as they're fine or they're not. When you talk about like adrenal fatigue or exhaustion to a medical doctor, most of them will not even acknowledge that system or that function, the way of looking at it. But it is real. I see it all the time when people have been stressed out for long periods of time. Your body can only produce the cortisol and all these different things for so long. And when it starts getting tired, so to speak, then your body can't keep up anymore. So a medical doctor might laugh if you say you have adrenal fatigue, just to warn you. One of the other things that can happen is either weight gain and or fluid retention can happen when the adrenals aren't working. A lot of times, if people are gaining in the midsection, a lot of times that's like a cortisol response, and you tend to gain in the middle of the body. Whereas a thyroid problem would tend to be the whole, like your whole system. Hair loss is another thing. Thyroid has to be ruled out again with the hair loss, but especially if it comes on pretty sudden, the hair loss can be from too much stress, because your nutrients will change when you're under stress, and your hair follicles will actually work differently when you're under too much stress for too long a time. And I won't say the last thing because there's many things that can happen, but there's a big relationship between your adrenal gland function and your immune system. So when people start having stress for many, many months into years, there's a connection with your immune system. And those people start tending to get colds more often and just more easily sick. If someone has something, they'll catch it. So that's another sign. If you're getting sick often, it's like, something's not right here with that adrenal gland function, because it can actually keep your immune system stronger when that's in the right place that it's supposed to be. Some of the other things that you can feel, the emotions tend to change a bit, maybe short temper, and your tolerance, like for putting up with people, isn't always where it should be, and you have a short fuse typically when this happens. So it affects many parts of your, not only the body, but emotionally too, and mentally this can happen. And I mentioned the insomnia thing can kind of get thrown out of balance from that. And there's different things that will trigger this to happen. Any kind of stress, whether it's physical stress of overworking yourself, like the type A personality that they just work. They work 60 hours a week and they never let up. Over time, your body just gets tired of doing that. You can only do it for so long. It's meant to rest. Emotional type stress, right? If you're in a bad family environment, or maybe your work environment's not that favorable, then emotional stress over time can weaken that part of your body, the adrenal system, because it's almost like you're in that state of fear or flight, like you want to get away from something, when your body gets in that emotional state for too long. Things like overtraining is another thing. So it seems like it's backed off a little bit, but 10 years ago, there was this really big thing with these Ironman type things, and these, even like for the average athlete, where they did these long runs and just really a lot of endurance stuff, right? And unless you're like in that 20, 30-year-old, that range, those folks can really tolerate that fairly well. But you can actually overtrain. So athletes, if they don't watch it, especially if they don't have good nutrition, they will overtrain and they'll start depleting their minerals and B vitamins, and they'll start falling into that fatigue thing where they just can't kind of get up to where they were, or their stamina starts dropping off. So that's something with some of those folks in that range, that I'll tell them sometimes, you just need to rest more. Back off on some of the endurance stuff and just rest a little bit more, because they really can't overdo it. Physical pain, that's one other area I forgot to mention. When people are in chronic pain for long periods of time, it tends to affect their sleep too. But the adrenal glands get in that same state of, like I'm running from a lion when you're in chronic pain. If you've ever dealt with that for a while, I had a really bad sciatic thing in 2019, and it was months, and it was disrupting my sleep, and I was experiencing this stuff, because the pain kept me in that mode of just always being stressed. So a lot of times for chiropractically, if I can help them with their spine or something like that to get them out of the pain, it actually helps them out of that adrenal fatigue thing. So that's something people don't really think of when they're in that chronic pain state. And if you've known anybody that's been there, they tend to, they're just crankier and they're hard to get along with, when they're in that pain state. And it's really not their fault. It's just that pain state is very tiring for the brain, and you get tired of being in pain. That's really the bottom line. But ideally, you want to fix whatever the problem is and try to avoid the pain medication as much as possible. There are different ways that you can assess this. So medically, what they would do a morning cortisol test. It's a blood test. And they would test your blood usually between somewhere around 8 and 9 in the morning. And that gives them a number, right? Because typically your cortisol will be a little higher in the morning and then tail down as the day goes on. And when people are in these different states, it'll be either like really low or sometimes too high. The problem with that is that it's only one point during the day. So if you're a person where it fluctuates during the day, you could take it in the morning and it's okay, but it's out of bounds in the end of the day, and they wouldn't catch that kind of thing. So they'll take the test and say you're okay, but you might not be. So there's actually a more accurate test. It's a saliva test, and you do it 4 times a day. So it's first thing in the morning, around noontime, late afternoon, and then usually 11 o'clock-ish at night. And so there's that normal rhythm I mentioned, a little higher in the morning, and then it should start tailing down as the day goes on. Well, some of these folks, you'll see it flipped. So they won't have much in the morning, so that's why they're like tired in the morning. And then it's higher in the evening, so even though they're tired, they're kind of wired, and that's what messes up their sleep. So they get what they call reverse curve with their cortisol, and then they have a hard time syncing up, and sleeping, and they roll out of bed, they're tired, and you won't catch that on that just one morning cortisol. Medically, they don't like the saliva test. They say it's not been proven enough, but it actually has. But in the medical office, they typically don't use it. But you can actually get them online, these cortisol tests now. And there's more and more medical doctors that are doing what they call functional medicine, where they're starting to think like I do. They're starting to more holistically. And they will know what that is. They can recommend those kind of tests. But those are the medical doctors that like to think out of the box, and they typically are a self-pay type doctor because they're not involved in all the insurance stuff. But in my opinion, that's the kind you want to go to get a really good, honest look at your whole picture. But that test is a really good test. That's kind of one of the baseline tests to see how well your adrenal glands are working, because that really gives you a more full picture. It also tests a marker called secretory IgA, which is in your saliva, and that's a marker of your first line of defense of your immune system, right? So like your mucous membranes, your sinus membranes, they have these immune activity that when you breathe something in like a bacteria or virus, that's the part of the immune system that tries to catch it, right, before it goes into your system. And what happens as that stress gets worse and the cortisol gets out of balance, that secretory IgA drops. And so that's one of the indicators where now it's impacting your immune system. And so as you balance the adrenals, that comes back up, and then that's one of the markers where you can say, okay, I'm healing and my immune system's getting better too. So that's another area that they track on that saliva test. And you can repeat it 6 months, 8 months to see how you're doing. Because it usually, I tell people depending on how bad off the person or how long they've been in that state, then 6 months to a year to really start getting into a good back to normal state, depending on how long they've been in that state. So there's different, I'm all about lifestyle and diet and that kind of stuff. So that's what I focus on first, and use nutrition and herbs and that kind of stuff too. A lot of times when we get into this state where your body's fatigued, caffeine is the type of stuff we reach for, right? Caffeine and sugar. Especially, I mentioned blood sugar regulation has to do with the adrenals. People will tend to crave sugar more when they're in this state because it kind of keeps them a little bumped up. I get that little sugar bump. But over time, it's just not good because it's almost like a fix. You're getting a sugar fix, basically, is what you're doing. And caffeine in limited amounts, 1 to 2 cups may be okay, but if you go much more than that, then it actually is harder to recover when you're having too much caffeine. When it comes to the foods, I try to get people onto what I call whole food diet, right? Get off of the processed foods. One of the most sound diets, I'll call it a diet, but it's really a lifestyle, is called Whole30. It's just the word whole, W-H-O-L-E, 30. It's basically a paleo-style diet where you eliminate like grain products from your diet, sugars, anything processed. And you're basically eating fruits and vegetables and healthy proteins, and it can really turn around your health very quickly. It's called Whole30 because they challenge you to do it a month at a time. And most people will lose weight, their energy goes up, they start sleeping better. And it's just a very sound diet. It's not gimmicky, it's just eating kind of basics. And it's really the kind of diet that we ate before we became more an agrarian society, where we settled down and started, making crops and all that stuff. It's a type of wanderer diet, that people used to eat when they traveled throughout the land. So that's kind of, someone stops me on the street, that's kind of what I tell them, is the Whole30 diet is really a good sound way to start getting your nutritional health back. When it comes to, and then watch kind of the stimulating stuff with the sugar and the caffeine. When it comes to sleep, when you're in that state where your body's kind of out of whack, sometimes you'll start getting sleepy early in the evening. And a lot of people will push through that little sleepy thing, 9, 10 o'clock or whatever. And what tends to happen is you'll get a second wind. And then it'll be hard to get back to sleep. So sometimes you really want to try to prioritize going to sleep a little earlier when you're getting in this state, to kind of sync your body up into a little earlier rhythm and not resist that getting tired around 9 o'clock and just go with it for a while, because over time you'll actually start getting back into a normal rhythm. We all use our devices a lot and stuff, so in the evening it's not good to use those a lot, because then you're stimulating your eyes with light, right? And the normal scenario is, if we didn't have light and everything, is when it got dark, then our circadian rhythm would kick in, right? And then the melatonin starts rising in your body as the daylight goes down. And so, but with lights, with devices that we can look at until we go to bed, it can actually slow down the release of melatonin in the evening. So I tell people at least an hour before it's ideal to try to unplug from your computers and your phones, because it's less stimulating for your body. I mentioned the pain factor. If there is, especially musculoskeletal pain, that can be helped. Things like chiropractic, massage therapy, acupuncture, those things are really wonderful for kind of getting that under control. So that's not the source of your problem. Exercise is good, but then again, not too much. So I usually, fast walking is always good. Sometimes when you're in this adrenal fatigue state, you don't want to do too much intense exercise. So usually treadmill or bike or fast walking is really enough. Weights, you have to be careful. Light weights are okay, but not like a heavy, like intense, really pushing it type weight training, because it's really too much for your body at that point when it's stuck in that state. Getting into relaxing environments, right? There's lots of relaxation techniques like deep breathing, abdominal, diaphragmatic breathing is really, really very powerful. Progressive relaxation, where you kind of tighten your muscles and relax them, and you do that all over the body. That's been proven to lower your cortisol levels. They did a little thing with going to the beach, which is very powerful actually. They actually measured cortisol levels, blood pressure, all these different markers, before and after an hour at the beach. And everything got better. Blood pressure got better, cortisol got better. And they call it like the blue effect, because of all the water and the sound. So just getting out in nature for just a little while, believe it or not, once or twice a week, goes a long way in trying to reset your system. Because that's kind of what you're trying to do. You're trying to reset your lifestyle and getting out of that mode of go, go, go. Because your body will get stuck in that state when you do it long enough. There are some supplements that can be helpful. Again, you want to make sure the diet and nutrition is good. But these can be very helpful. Vitamin C is needed for the adrenal glands to make adrenaline and those type of things. So that's always helpful. The B complex, there's many of them in there, but the B complex is needed in order to make a lot of the hormones that helps your adrenal glands function the way they're supposed to. Salt has got a bad rap for many years with the whole blood pressure thing. They actually estimate that in terms of blood pressure problems, it's roughly 15% of the people with blood pressure problems actually have a salt problem. So it's not a lot of them. And sometimes I think what happens is people go on the other side and don't get enough salt, because you can get not enough salt in your diet, and it'll affect your energy. Believe it or not, when you don't get enough salt. So the good kind, like the pink salt, the Himalayan, or the sea salt, that's the kind you want to focus on. Like a mineral complex, because we need trace minerals for your body, like selenium's a very common one for your body to use to make these different hormones, especially your thyroid too. And on the herbal side, there's a few that are what they call adaptogens, meaning they help your body if your glands aren't working too well, they help bring it up, and if they're overworking, they help bring it down a little bit. So they're very, very good herbs. Rhodiola is one of those that are very effective in helping balance out your adrenal gland system, and it can help with overall, bless you, it can help with overall stamina of the body as well, the rhodiola. Ashwagandha is another herb, an Indian herb, and that also has an effect on your thyroid gland too, so it actually helps the adrenals and the thyroid. And the neat thing about these is they can, because they bring balance, they indirectly help your sleep. So it doesn't make you sleepy, but because they help your adrenals balance and work better, then you tend to sleep better because it starts taking away that middle of the night wake up thing that can happen to people where they have a hard time getting back to sleep. Ginseng is one that you have to be careful about. It's still good, but some people, ginseng tends to be more on the stimulating side. So I usually have people take that early in the day, like in the morning time frame, especially when people are the type where they are waking up and they're really like super tired in the morning and it takes them a couple hours to get going. The ginseng sometimes will get them going quicker and it'll get them back on their feet faster. And you don't always need that very long. Like the ashwagandha and the rhodiola, you can take those for months at a time. They're safe. Ginseng, sometimes, depending on your body type, you won't need that for months at a time. It might only be weeks that you need a product like that. And because it acts really fast, it probably acts even faster than the rhodiola and ashwagandha. You can take that like in the day, and usually within hours you feel the effect, because it's a stronger herb in general, much stronger and faster acting. But I don't tend to use that as much because it's easy to overstimulate people, and then you start messing up their sleep again because they got too much energy at the end of the day. So I tend to be careful about that part. And then tying it all together, it's not one thing that we look at when this happens, because one of the things also with nutritional deficiencies and just diet in general. So food sensitivities sometimes will throw your body out of balance, right? When your body is having what they call an allergy reaction or a sensitivity reaction, your adrenals help control that reaction so it doesn't get really out of control. And so if you're consuming a food that's always kind of putting you in that allergy state, it'll also be another stressor for your adrenal gland system. So sometimes we've gotten people better by getting them off gluten or dairy, or especially the sugar addicts. I mean, some of those people have to get off their sugar kick for them to get better. But that's also something we rule out is food sensitivities, because once you get them off that food, their body calms down more, and then their energy starts getting better, and their inflammation gets better, because a lot of food sensitivities will trigger inflammation in your body as well. And then working with the pain, taking care of that, and then getting the stress overall better. And some people, I've told some people that were had jobs that were outrageous and they were just killing them basically. And I've told them, you just have to make a decision here about how important your health is, because sometimes you need to change a job, or get a different position, or something that's going to take you out of that environment. It's a little harder with family, it's like that's a lot more complicated. And there are some times when I've tried to help patients and they've had a bad family environment, and I can only take them so far because they'll always be in that stressful state because of that, both physically and emotionally. And I can keep them maybe from crashing totally, but to get them completely well, they have to resolve whatever that conflict is, or else they just won't get well. There's like limitations. So I think that summarizes pretty much that. Does anybody have any questions?
When you don't have enough salt, doesn't that also create a sugar? You crave sugar when you don't have enough salt.
And that can, and kind of the way it indirectly works is with that adrenal thing, because if the adrenals don't work as well, and when they don't work as well, then your sugar cravings increase. So yeah, the question was, if you don't have enough salt, more sugar cravings. Yes, yeah, definitely, very, very much so. Mm-hmm. Fred?
You mentioned the adrenals getting tired, but I guess, how do you get to that point? How do you recognize it when it's you?
Yeah, so some of those signs of the being exhausted when you wake up, even though you thought you slept okay, One of the other things I didn't mention is sometimes people will get more muscle and joint pain because the way that the adrenals regulate minerals and vitamins in your body, when it's not doing that well, you actually won't get proper nutrition to the muscles and joints, and you actually get achier. That's one of the things. And then the insomnia. I mentioned insomnia. More so the waking up in the middle of the night. And it's okay if you're waking up and getting right back to sleep, but if you're waking up and staying up for a half an hour or more, then that's usually the adrenals. What happens is, so when you sleep through the night, there should be enough cortisol in your blood to keep your blood sugar up so that your brain's happy while you're sleeping. And what happens is when the adrenals are tired, so to speak, it can't hold that level of cortisol. Your blood sugar drops and your body wakes up because your brain doesn't like that. So when you wake up, it stimulates more cortisol and the sugar comes up some more. So it's kind of like a vicious cycle thing, though. And then the sugar craving is another thing. People will tend to crave sugar more if their adrenals are not very happy. So it's kind of subtle things, kind of like that. Sure.
Can working graveyard shift also throw it off?
Very much so, because so they did a study on health statistics, first, second, and third shift, and like whatever it is, heart condition, and sleeping, whatever the conditions they were tracking, I forget they were. As you go to second shift, those conditions get worse. As you go to third shift, those conditions get even worse. So people's overall health got worse from the latest shift had the highest incidence of health problems in that category. Because it's kind of reversing your normal circadian rhythm, and so it is a form of stress, in my opinion. Some people can't avoid working those hours. It's kind of a bummer, but they actually need more nutrition. They need to eat better. They need to be very careful about regulating their lifestyle better, because it is harder for your body to work that way. It's a form of stress, actually, to the body just by itself, because you're out of your normal rhythm.
Speaking about the sleep, waking up in the middle of the night or whatever, I've heard magnesium is good for that.
It can, yeah, and that's one of the minerals that is helpful for the whole adrenal thing in your whole body, muscles, and magnesium has a calming effect, on your nervous system, and a lot of people don't eat a lot of food. Sometimes if you're not getting a whole food diet, you won't get enough magnesium in your diet, and so sometimes that'll actually help fix the problems if it's a magnesium problem. Sometimes it's more complicated, but that's always something I check for in folks, because it's the easy fix if it works. It's just giving them a mineral and they feel better, and they sleep better. I mean, that's the easy knock it out of the park kind of thing. But it can be a lot more complicated, unfortunately. But that is one of the minerals that we check first, is the magnesium. Any other questions? You guys are pretty easy. It's good? All right, cool. All righty, thanks. Yes,